In the quiet, tree-lined streets of Crestwood Heights, life was supposed to be peaceful. The kind of neighborhood where kids ride bikes down wide sidewalks, neighbors wave hello over white picket fences, and everyone follows the unspoken rules that keep things running smoothly. But for one resident, Alex Carter, this idyllic setting quickly turned into a battleground, not because of anything dramatic like crime or natural disasters, but because of something much smaller yet equally infuriating. An HOA, a president with a flair for drama. It all started on what seemed like any other Saturday morning. Alex had woken up early, grabbed a cup of coffee, and headed out to join the monthly community cleanup event near the pool area. It wasn't mandatory, but Alex liked pitching in. They figured if they were going to live here, they might as well contribute to keeping the place nice. Plus, it gave them a chance to chat with some of the neighbors without feeling awkward about interrupting their day. The morning went by smoothly enough. People laughed and joked while picking up stray leaves and empty soda cans left behind after last week's swim meet. Alex was just finishing up when disaster struck, or at least what felt like disaster at the time. As they bent down to toss a plastic wrapper into a trash bag, their wallet slipped out of their pocket unnoticed. By the time Alex realized it was missing, they had already walked halfway home. Panic set in. That wallet didn't just hold cash. It contained their ID card, credit cards, and a few cherished photos tucked inside. Heart racing, Alex rushed back to the pool area, hoping against hope that no one had picked it up yet. Sure enough, there it was lying innocently on the ground, near the sewer grate. Relief washed over Alex, until they saw her standing there. Susan Langley, the self-appointed queen bee of the HOA, stood with her hands on her hips, glaring at the wallet like it was radioactive waste. She was flanked by two other board members who looked more amused than concerned. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Susan's reputation. She ruled the HOA with an iron fist, enforcing rules so ridiculous you'd think she was auditioning for a reality TV show. No holiday decorations before December 1st? Check. Fines for lawn grass being half an inch too long? Double check. And heaven forbid you dared to leave your garage door open for longer than 5 minutes. Ah, I see we have another rule breaker, Susan said loudly, drawing attention from the handful of people still lingering around. Her voice dripped with condescension, making Alex cringe even before she continued. Personal belongings left unattended are considered litter under HOA guidelines. You really should know better. Before Alex could respond, Susan bent down, snatched the wallet, and flipped it open. Out fell the ID card, landing face up on the pavement. Instead of handing it back, Susan smirked. Well, since you clearly don't value your property, maybe someone else will. With that, she picked up the ID and casually tossed it into the sewer grate nearby. A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd watching the scene unfold. What the hell is wrong with you? Alex blurted out, stunned. That's my ID. Oh dear, Susan replied mockingly, fluttering her eyelashes like she was auditioning for a soap opera villain. Maybe next time you'll remember to follow the rules. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have important matters to attend to. Turning on her heel, she strutted off, leaving Alex fuming and humiliated in front of their neighbors. For a moment, Alex just stood there, staring at the sewer grate. The ID was gone, swallowed by darkness, along with any shred of dignity Alex had left. Neighbors exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure whether to intervene or pretend they hadn't seen anything. One older man finally approached, patting Alex on the shoulder sympathetically. Don't let her get to you, he muttered. She's like that with everyone. But Alex couldn't shake off the anger bubbling inside. This wasn't just about losing an ID, it was about how Susan treated people like pawns in her twisted game of control. She thrived on making others feel small, powerless, insignificant. And worst of all, she got away with it every single time. Later that evening, sitting alone in their living room nursing a glass of wine, Alex replayed the incident over and over in their mind. The humiliation burned fresh each time. But beneath the frustration lay something else, a spark of determination. Susan thought she was untouchable, invincible even. But Alex knew better. Everyone had weaknesses, blind spots, vulnerabilities. If Susan wanted to play dirty, then fine. Two could play that game. Little did Susan realize her latest victim wasn't just any ordinary homeowner. Alex had connections far beyond Crestwood Heights connections that could make her life very, very difficult. And as the night wore on, a plan began forming in Alex's mind. A plan that would teach Susan a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. The next morning, Alex woke up with a mix of emotions swirling inside: anger, embarrassment, but also a growing sense of curiosity. What made Susan tick? Who was she really behind that polished facade and her holier-than-thou attitude? Most people in Crestwood Heights only saw the surface, the perfectly styled hair, the designer clothes, the sharp tongue that cut people down before they could even respond. But Alex wanted to dig deeper. If Susan thought she could toss someone's ID into a sewer and walk away scot-free, then maybe it was time for her to learn what happened when you messed with the wrong person. Alex started by doing some casual research. They weren't exactly a detective, but years of working in industries where networking mattered had taught them how to gather information without raising suspicion. First stop, social media. Everyone left breadcrumbs online if you knew where to look, and Susan was no exception. Her profiles were filled with carefully curated photos, lavish parties at her mansion, charity galas where she posed with celebrities, family portraits that screamed wealth and privilege. But one thing stood out more than anything else. Susan rarely posted about herself alone. Almost every picture included her husband, Richard Langley. Now Richard wasn't just any rich guy. He was the Richard Langley, a name synonymous with luxury real estate across the country. His company specialized in acquiring high-profile properties, renovating them into dream homes for billionaires, and flipping them for jaw-dropping profits. From beachfront estates in Malibu to penthouses overlooking Manhattan, his projects dominated headlines. And recently, he'd made waves by purchasing one of the most expensive mansions in California, a $7 billion property perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was said to be his magnum opus, a project so grand that architects and designers were already calling it the house of the century. But here's the thing about massive projects like that: they don't happen overnight. Building permits, environmental regulations, zoning laws, all these hurdles needed to be cleared before construction could begin. And while Richard might have been the public face of the empire, Alex suspected Susan played a role too. Women like her thrived on influence, whether earned or borrowed. She probably loved rubbing shoulders with politicians and bureaucrats, reminding everyone whose money greased the wheels of progress. That thought sparked an idea in Alex's mind, an idea that grew stronger as they kept digging. A few clicks later, Alex stumbled upon something interesting. The Coastal Commission, a state agency responsible for overseeing development along California's coastline, had final say over projects like Richard's mansion. Without their approval, nothing moved forward. Even minor delays could cost millions, and significant roadblocks, those could sink entire deals. As Alex scrolled through news articles and press releases, they noticed a familiar name mentioned repeatedly in connection with recent decisions: Mia Torres. Mia Torres. Just seeing the name brought back memories. They hadn't spoken in years, not since college, But Mia had always been the kind of person who stayed glued to your mind long after you parted ways. Back then, she'd been passionate about environmental causes, often leading protests against companies accused of polluting local ecosystems. After graduation, she'd gone on to work for various government agencies, climbing the ranks until she landed a key position within the Coastal Commission. If anyone had the power to slow down or even stop a project like Richard's mansion, it was Mia. Alex hesitated for a moment. Reaching out after all this time felt strange, almost invasive. Would Mia even remember them? And if she did, would she agree to help? This wasn't a small favor they were asking for. It was potentially career-ending stuff. But then again, Mia had always hated bullies. In fact, she used to joke that her life mission was to take down anyone who abused their power. Maybe, just maybe, she'd see the situation the same way. With a deep breath, Alex opened a new email draft. Keeping it casual, they wrote a quick message explaining what had happened, the ID incident, Susan's behavior, and the broader pattern of control she exerted over the neighborhood. Then came the kicker. I know we haven't talked in ages, but I'm hoping you can offer some advice. Turns out, the guy married to this HOA tyrant happens to own a certain $7 billion mansion currently awaiting approval from your department. Any chance karma might step in and give him a reality check? Hitting send felt surreal. For the rest of the day, Alex alternated between checking their inbox obsessively and trying to distract themselves with mundane tasks around the house. When Mia finally responded late that evening, Alex nearly dropped their phone in excitement. Wow. Mia wrote, "Sounds like this woman has quite the ego problem. Let me look into it and see what I can do. No promises, but if there's even a hint of shady business tied to this project, trust me, I'll find it." That reply lit a fire under Alex. Suddenly, the plan felt real, not just some half-baked idea born out of frustration. Over the next few days, they exchanged messages with Mia, sharing everything they'd uncovered about Susan and Richard. Meanwhile, Alex kept a close eye on Susan, watching her strut around the neighborhood like nothing had changed. She still barked orders at landscapers, fined residents for minor infractions, and generally acted like she owned the place. Little did she know, her world was about to crack wide open. One afternoon, while walking past Susan's house, Alex spotted movers unloading boxes labeled Coastal Living Magazine. Clearly, Susan was preparing for yet another round of publicity, likely tied to Richard's mansion. The irony wasn't lost on Alex. Here she was, living large off her husband's success, completely oblivious to the storm brewing behind the scenes. Karma worked in mysterious ways, and Alex couldn't wait to see how this chapter unfolded. As the days passed, Alex found themselves smiling more often, not because they enjoyed revenge, but because they finally felt like they had some control over the situation. Susan may have thought she was untouchable, but Alex knew better. Power always came with vulnerabilities, and sometimes all it took was finding the right person to pull the right string. And thanks to Mia, that string was about to get yanked hard. The moment Alex decided to pick up the phone and call Mia, they felt a mix of nerves and excitement bubbling in their chest. This wasn't just any conversation. It was the kind that could change everything. The weight of what they were about to do hit them hard, but there was no turning back now. If Susan thought she could toss someone's dignity into a sewer and walk away unscathed, it was time for her to learn otherwise. It was late at night when Alex finally dialed Mia's number. They waited as the phone rang, each second stretching longer than the last. When Mia answered, her voice sounded warm and familiar, like slipping into an old sweater you hadn't worn in years. "Hey, stranger," she said with a laugh. "Long time no talk." Alex chuckled nervously. trying to sound casual despite the adrenaline coursing through their veins. Yeah, way too long. How've you been? They exchanged pleasantries for a few minutes, catching up on life, work, and how crazy the world had gotten since they'd last seen each other. But Alex didn't waste much time before steering the conversation toward why they'd really called. Listen, Mia, they began, their tone shifting slightly. I need your help with something. Remember how you always told me I should stand up to bullies? Well, let's just say I've got one, and she's about to find out exactly how connected I am. Mia paused, curiosity sparking in her voice. Oh? Do tell. So Alex explained everything, the HOA president throwing their ID into the sewer, the humiliation in front of the neighbors, and most importantly, who this woman really was. Married to Richard Langley, the billionaire behind the $7 billion mansion project currently awaiting approval from Mia's department. As Alex spoke, they could practically hear the gears turning in Mia's head. She didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, she just listened, absorbing every detail. When Alex finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Mia exhaled sharply. Wow, that's bold, even for someone like her. You're telling me this woman threw your ID into a sewer because of some ridiculous HOA rule? Yep, Alex replied flatly. And trust me, that's not even the worst thing she's done around here. She runs this place like it's her personal kingdom, fining people for having their garage doors open too long or planting flowers that aren't on her approved list. Everyone's scared of her, but honestly, I don't think she realizes how far her power actually goes or doesn't go. Mia made a thoughtful noise. Okay, here's the deal. Projects like this mansion, they're complicated. There are environmental regulations, zoning laws, permits, lots of moving parts. Even minor issues can cause major delays. And if there's any hint of impropriety, say, cutting corners on paperwork or ignoring certain guidelines, it gives us leverage to freeze things indefinitely. Alex leaned forward, gripping the phone tighter. So what you're saying is, I'm saying, Mia interrupted with a sly edge to her voice, that if I flag this project for additional scrutiny, it'll grind to a halt faster than you can say coastal preservation. Now, I can't promise anything definitive yet, I'll need to dig deeper, but if there's even a whiff of known compliance, we'll have grounds to act. That was all Alex needed to hear. A slow smile spread across their face as they realized the enormity of what Mia was offering. This wasn't just about punishing Susan. It was about exposing the cracks in her perfect little world. People like her thrived on control, but control only worked when everyone else played along. Once the rules started working against her, she'd crumble. Thank you, Alex said sincerely. You have no idea how much this means to me and to everyone else stuck dealing with her nonsense. No problem, Mia replied lightly, though. There was a hint of steel beneath her words. Consider it my civic duty. Besides, if anyone deserves a reality check, it's someone who thinks they're above the law. After hanging up, Alex sat in stunned silence for a while, replaying the conversation in their mind. It felt surreal, almost cinematic, like something out of a movie where the underdog finally gets their chance to strike back. But this was real life, and the stakes couldn't be higher. What happened next depended entirely on Mia, and whether she found enough dirt to justify freezing the mansion project. Over the next few days, Alex tried to keep busy, distracting themselves with chores and errands. But it was impossible not to think about what Mia might uncover. Every email notification made their heart skip a beat. Every text message sent a jolt of anticipation through their body. Finally, late one evening, Mia sent a brief update. Got it. The project's flagged for review. Expect fireworks soon. Alex stared at the screen, reading the words over and over again until they sank in. Fireworks. That was putting it mildly. This wasn't just a delay, it was a full-blown disaster waiting to happen for Susan and Richard. Construction crews would be forced to stop work, investors would grow nervous, and reporters would start sniffing around for answers, all because of one phone call. Sure enough, the fallout began almost immediately. By midweek, news spread like wildfire throughout Crestwood Heights. Neighbors whispered about strange activity at the Langley Mansion site, workers packing up tools, machinery being loaded onto trucks, and supervisors pacing anxiously while clutching clipboards. Rumors swirled about why the project had suddenly ground to a halt, though no official explanation had been given yet. Susan, meanwhile, seemed blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. She continued strutting around the neighborhood as if nothing had changed, barking orders at landscapers and handing out fines like candy. But Alex noticed something different in her demeanor, a faint twitch of irritation whenever someone mentioned the mansion. At first, it was subtle, barely noticeable. But as the days went on, her frustration became harder to hide. One afternoon, Alex spotted her arguing heatedly with a delivery driver outside her house. Her face was flushed red, her hands gesturing wildly as she shouted something about deadlines and incompetence. For a brief moment, Alex allowed themselves to feel a flicker of satisfaction. Karma was already starting to catch up with her, and it hadn't even reached its full stride yet. But the real showstopper came a few days later when Alex received another message from Mia. Attached was a screenshot of an internal memo sent to key stakeholders involved in the mansion project. The subject line said it all: ***, project temporarily suspended pending further review. ***, this is huge, Mia wrote. Looks like someone cut a few corners on the environmental impact report. Nothing major, but enough to raise eyebrows. Trust me, this is going to get messy. Alex grinned, feeling a surge of vindication wash over them. Messy was exactly what Susan deserved. People like her lived in glass houses, pretending they were invincible while throwing stones at everyone else. But now those stones were coming right back, and Alex couldn't wait to see how she'd handle the fallout. As the days turned into weeks, the chaos surrounding the Langley Mansion project only grew louder and more chaotic. What started as a quiet bureaucratic hiccup quickly escalated into a full-blown crisis for Richard Langley's empire and, by extension, his wife Susan. The delay wasn't just inconvenient. It was catastrophic. Construction crews that had been hired at astronomical rates were now sitting idle, their equipment gathering dust. Investors who'd poured millions into the project began calling emergency meetings, demanding answers. And, behind closed doors, tensions between Richard and Susan reached boiling points. For Susan, the situation felt like a personal attack. She'd always prided herself on being untouchable, someone whose wealth and status shielded her from consequences. But now, cracks were starting to show in her carefully constructed facade. Every morning, she woke up dreading what new obstacle might arise. Would it be another email from Richard's lawyers? Another call from an angry investor? Or worse, another nosy reporter sniffing around for dirt? Alex watched all of this unfold with a mix of fascination and satisfaction. They didn't have to lift a finger anymore. The wheels of karma were spinning faster than anyone could control. Still, Alex couldn't resist keeping tabs on Susan. It wasn't hard to do. Gossip traveled fast in Crestwood Heights, especially when it involved someone as polarizing as the HOA president. Neighbors whispered about heated arguments they'd overheard coming from the Langley's house late at night. Others noticed how Susan had stopped attending HOA meetings altogether, leaving her cronies to scramble and cover for her absence. But the real fireworks began when the media got involved. Reporters love a good scandal, and the sudden halt of A $7 billion mansion project was practically begging for headlines. At first, coverage was vague, just speculative articles wondering why such a prestigious deal had hit a roadblock. But then things took a turn when anonymous tips started surfacing online. Someone, had leaked details about Susan's infamous behavior in the neighborhood, including the viral-worthy incident of her tossing Alex's ID into the sewer. It didn't take long for journalists to connect the dots. Within days, local news outlets published exposés detailing Susan's reign of terror in Crestwood Heights. One article described her as the epitome of entitled arrogance, complete with quotes from disgruntled neighbors recounting stories of fines issued for trivial infractions, like mismatched mailbox colors or lawn ornaments deemed too tacky. Another piece included grainy security footage, captured by a neighbor's camera, a damning clip showing Susan casually dropping Alex's ID into the sewer while smirking triumphantly. The internet lit up almost instantly. Memes mocking Susan flooded social media platforms, turning her into an overnight sensation, but not the kind she'd ever wanted. People dubbed her Sewer Karen, creating countless variations of images captioned with phrases like, "When life gives you lemons, throw someone else's ID into the drain." Late-night comedians picked up the story, turning it into fodder for jokes during monologues. Even national news programs ran segments about the absurdity of it all, shaking their heads at how one woman's petty actions had spiraled so wildly out of control. Back in Crestwood Heights, reactions were mixed. Some residents found the whole thing hilarious, openly cheering for Alex and speculating about what other skeletons might be hiding in Susan's closet. Others were more cautious, worried about potential backlash from speaking out against someone as vindictive as Susan. But no matter where people stood, one thing was clear: Susan's reputation was irreparably damaged. Her once uncheckable authority over the HOA crumbled as former allies distanced themselves, eager to avoid association with her toxic brand of leadership. Through it all, Alex remained eerily calm. They never gloated publicly or admitted to having anything to do with the fallout. Instead, they focused on observing the ripple effect of their single phone call. Watching Susan squirm under the weight of public scrutiny was oddly therapeutic. For years, she'd bullied and belittled others without facing any consequences. Now, the universe was serving her a heaping plate of humility, and Alex had front-row seats to the show. Things came to a head one particularly chaotic afternoon when Avati and Alex had front-row seats to the show. Things came to a head one particularly chaotic afternoon when Hafiyafin, Dinavenchu, Engine and Aches had front-row seats to the show. Susan finally snapped. A group of reporters had gathered outside her house, shouting questions about the mansion project and holding up printed copies of the security footage showing her tossing the ID into the sewer. Cameras flashed relentlessly as she stormed out of her front door, red-faced and visibly fuming. "This is harassment," she shrieked, pointing accusingly at the crowd. "You have no right to invade my privacy like this." Her outburst only fueled the frenzy, drawing even more attention to the spectacle. By the time she retreated inside, slamming the door behind her, the video of her meltdown had already gone viral. Social media users roasted her mercilessly, dubbing her tantrum the performance of the year. Meanwhile, Richard Langley released a carefully worded statement condemning his wife's behavior, claiming he was deeply disappointed by her actions and promising to address the issues plaguing the mansion project personally. Behind closed doors, however, the couple's relationship was unraveling. Richard reportedly confronted Susan in private, furious about the damage she'd caused to his business dealings. According to whispers circulating among mutual acquaintances, he accused her of jeopardizing everything they'd worked for all because of her inability to keep her ego in check. Their arguments grew louder and more frequent, culminating in Susan moving out temporarily to stay at a luxury hotel downtown. For Alex, watching Susan's downfall unfold felt surreal. Revenge wasn't something they'd ever sought intentionally, but seeing justice served, even indirectly, was deeply satisfying. It reminded them of an important truth. Power only works when everyone else lets it. Once people stop playing along, even the most seemingly untouchable figures can come crashing down. By the time the dust settled, Crestwood Heights felt different. The oppressive grip Susan once held over the neighborhood had loosened significantly. Neighbors who'd previously feared speaking out began organizing informal gatherings to discuss ways to reform the HOA's outdated policies. Some even approached Alex directly, thanking them for standing up to Susan and inspiring others to do the same. Though Alex never revealed their role in freezing the mansion project, they didn't need to. Karma spoke loudly enough on its own. As the weeks passed, life in Crestwood Heights slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. The streets still looked pristine, the lawn still perfectly manicured, but there was a subtle shift in the air. People smiled more genuinely now, laughed more freely, and dared to dream bigger than before. And somewhere deep inside, Alex allowed themselves a quiet moment of pride. They hadn't set out to change the world or even their neighborhood, but sometimes small acts of defiance could spark big changes. All it took was knowing which strings to pull and having the courage to pull them. Months had passed since the chaos surrounding Susan and Richard's $7 billion mansion project first erupted, and Crestwood Heights was beginning to feel like a different place altogether. The once oppressive shadow cast by Susan's iron-fisted rule over the HOA had lifted, leaving behind something unexpected: hope. Neighbors who had tiptoed around her for years were finally standing up straight, their shoulders squared with newfound confidence. Conversations buzzed not just about what had happened, but also about how things could be better moving forward. And at the center of it all, though quietly, almost invisibly, was Alex. For Alex, life hadn't changed dramatically on the surface. They still woke up early, sipped coffee on the porch, and went about their routine as usual. But inside there was a quiet sense of satisfaction that lingered long after the drama had faded from headlines. Watching someone like Susan unravel under the weight of her own arrogance wasn't just vindicating. It was proof that sometimes justice really did exist in this messy, unpredictable world. But Alex knew better than to let themselves get too caught up in gloating. Revenge stories always sounded satisfying in theory, but they rarely ended well when taken too far. Instead, Alex focused on what mattered most: rebuilding the neighborhood into a community where people felt safe, respected, and valued, not ruled by fear. It wasn't easy, and progress came slowly, but every small step forward felt like a victory worth celebrating. Susan, meanwhile, had become a shell of her former self. Once the epitome of polished perfection, she now avoided public appearances altogether, retreating into near isolation. Her absence from HOA meetings gave other board members the chance to take charge, revisiting outdated rules and proposing changes that made more sense for modern living. Gone were the days of punishing residents for harmless infractions like mismatched curtains or slightly overgrown hedges. In their place came policies designed to foster kindness and cooperation rather than compliance through intimidation. Richard Langley fared little better professionally. After months of delays and mounting pressure from investors, he made the painful decision to sell the Malibu mansion at a steep loss. Reports claimed he unloaded the property for less than half its original value, citing unforeseen complications as the reason. Privately, insiders whispered that his marriage to Susan was hanging by a thread, with both parties blaming each other for the collapse of the project. Whatever love or partnership they'd once shared seemed to have dissolved entirely, replaced by bitterness and resentment. As news of Richard's financial setback spread, so did whispers about Susan's role in the debacle. People pieced together the timeline, the ID incident, the media circus, the anonymous leaks, and drew their own conclusions. While no one could prove Alex's involvement directly, many suspected they'd played a part in bringing Susan down. Some even approached Alex privately to thank them, though Alex always shrugged off the praise, insisting they'd merely been in the right place at the right time. One crisp autumn afternoon, months after the storm had settled, Alex found themselves sitting on their porch with a cup of tea, watching kids ride bikes down the street. A neighbor walked by a woman named Linda, who'd once been too intimidated to speak out against Susan, but now served as interim HOA president. She waved warmly and paused to chat. "You know," Linda said, leaning against the fence, "things are starting to feel lighter around here. Like we can breathe again." Alex smiled, nodding in agreement. "Yeah, it's nice. Feels like people are actually happy to live here now instead of just tolerating it." Linda chuckled softly. "Funny how one person can make such a big difference, huh? I don't know what you did or didn't do, but whatever it was, thank you." Alex hesitated for a moment, tempted to share the truth. But instead, they simply replied, "Sometimes karma takes care of things without needing much help." The comment earned a knowing grin from Linda, who patted the fence before continuing on her way. As Alex watched her go, they couldn't help but reflect on how far everyone had come since that fateful day at the pool. Life in Crestwood Heights wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was better, kinder, more human. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Alex sat alone in their living room, scrolling through old photos on their phone. One picture stood out, a grainy screenshot of the security footage showing Susan tossing the ID into the sewer. For a brief moment, Alex allowed themselves to relive the anger and humiliation of that moment. Then, closing the app, they set the phone aside and leaned back on the couch. It was strange. They thought how moments of pain could lead to unexpected triumphs. Throwing that ID into the sewer had been the lowest point of Alex's week, maybe even their year. But it had also sparked something powerful, a chain reaction that rippled outward, touching lives far beyond their own. People who had once been afraid to speak up were finding their voices. Families who had dreaded interactions with the HOA now looked forward to contributing ideas. Even strangers online had rallied around the story, turning it into a symbol of resistance against unchecked power. And yet, none of it would have happened if Alex hadn't decided to fight back. Not violently, not maliciously, but strategically. By reaching out to Mia, leveraging connections, and trusting that the system could work when nudged in the right direction, Alex had proven that standing up to bullies didn't always require grand gestures. Sometimes it was enough to plant a seed and let nature take its course. The weeks turned into months, and eventually, life in Crestwood Heights settled into a comfortable rhythm. The HOA continued to evolve, becoming more inclusive and transparent with each passing meeting. Residents organized block parties, planted community gardens, and worked together to solve problems rather than pointing fingers. It wasn't utopia, but it was close enough to feel like home. As for Susan, she remained a distant memory, an exaggerated cautionary tale told at dinner parties and holiday gatherings. Kids joked about sewer Karen during sleepovers, unaware of the real-life drama that inspired the nickname. Adults reminisced about the chaos she'd caused, shaking their heads in disbelief that anyone could wield so much power so recklessly. For Alex, the lesson of it all was simple. Power only thrives when left unchecked. Whether it's an HOA president abusing her authority or a billionaire bending rules to suit his agenda, accountability matters. And while revenge might feel good in the moment, True justice comes from creating lasting change, not tearing others down. On a quiet spring morning, nearly a year after the ID incident, Alex received a letter in the mail. It was unsigned, written in neat cursive on plain white paper. The message was short but poignant. Asterisk. Thank you for reminding us that even the smallest actions can spark big change. You've given us our neighborhood back. Asterisk. Alex read the note several times, smiling softly as they folded it and tucked it away in a drawer. Whoever had sent it didn't need to sign their name. The sentiment spoke for itself. Change had come to Crestwood Heights, not because of any one person, but because everyone had dared to believe it was possible. And as Alex stepped outside to greet the new day, they felt a deep sense of peace knowing they'd played a part in making it happen.